Something strange is happening to Tucker Carlson. This is from his interview with political scientist and international relations scholar John Mearsheimer.
And in fact, if you go back and read the literature on the creation of Israel, this is all thoroughly documented. Ethnic cleansing was a subject that the Zionists talked about from the get-go, and they talked about extensively, because there was no way they could create a greater Israel without doing massive ethnic cleansing. You want to remember that when the Zionists come to Israel, starting in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there are remarkably few Jews in Palestine. And those Jews are not Zionists. The Zionists are the Jews who come from Europe.
Right.
And they understand that they're moving into a territory that's filled with Palestinian villages and Palestinian people. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how can you create a Jewish state on a piece of territory that's filled with Palestinians without doing ethnic cleansing, massive ethnic cleansing? And the answer is you can't. So they're talking about and thinking about ethnic cleansing from the get-go. So the idea that they wouldn't think of what the situation looks like after October 7th is an opportunity to do ethnic cleansing, it belies.
So it wasn't really a land without people for a people without land.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Classic Carlson, isn't it? He says something, which he knows it wasn't a land for people that land. He knows that's not right. So what you're telling me is this thing I already know. Anyway, it's a nice sort of personality tick. It's quite amusing. There's, of course, the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which is the starting gun for the State of Israel. At that time, I think about 7% of the population of Palestine, 7% was Jewish. Mostly settlers, but of course you have very long-standing Jewish communities there as well for literally thousands of years. 7%. And in that document, published in 1917, Palestinians and Arabs aren't mentioned once. It's not mentioned once. It refers to existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. In other words, 93% of the people living there. One day later, Carlson went on to interview retired US Green Beret Tony Aguila, who worked in Gaza as an aid contractor.
How did the Israeli military, the IDF, treat Palestinian civilians?
I could describe it as nothing more than they treated them like animals. Even the UG Solutions and the SRS personnel on the ground, what was concerning to me, because I witnessed this in years of Iraq, when you get down the road and you start describing people in a certain way, you start to dehumanize them. Even the U.S. contractors on the ground called them the zombie horde. The IDF, and in some cases we, don't recognize these people as human beings. And part of my why I want to talk and come out in this is because I saw these human beings. I was there. This photo here, this is on Site 1. That's a human being. I took this photo. This didn't come from some far left journalist or from the Gaza Health Ministry. I took that picture. This here. These are the people that we're dehumanizing, that we're killing in mass scale, that we're depriving of food and water, that we are torturing in a way because they're not eating at all. And we're calling them all Hamas. That's what we're calling them.
Really powerful stuff there. Helena, what did you make of these two clips that came from Tucker Carlson just a moment ago? I mean, talking about quite different things to two different people, but there's a pattern here of actually quite powerful conversations which are exerting massive influence right now over American politics.
I think I remember that Tucker Carlson is a leader, as a follower and not a leader. He follows where he believes that the dial is turning towards. He's always kind of been like a MAGA loyalist in reality, right? He's always stuck with the basis of that campaign. But I think he understands where the tide is turning to and wants to make sure that he's providing output that he can be popular with. Of course, he is on his own now. He is an independent journalist since being untied from Fox News, where he admitted himself in his time at Fox News, he was just doing what the oligarchs and the media barons told him to say. He was happy to follow their instructions. But now that he has to rely on his own base rather than a salary, he's got to ensure that he is following where he is being led to. And given that the MAGA base are really falling out with Israel, again, not for anti-Zionist reasons, I think it's really important to understand there is no principle that is anti-Zionist towards the reason why a lot of the MAGA base, especially the young people that Tucker Carlson wants to connect with, are moving away from Israel, right? It's not even necessarily isolationism. I think a lot of these people would support, for example, military intervention in the South China Sea, for example. But in terms of what Israel represents to them and the relationship what it represents is essentially what they see as another country leading the America that they believe should be America first, around in terms of geopolitics. We'll follow Israel into Gaza. We'll follow Israel as they commit war crimes. We'll follow Israel into Lebanon. We'll follow Israel into Syria. We'll follow Israel into Iran. And this is the same kind of forever war that they were told they were never going to get under a Trump presidency. When you look at, for example, Tucker Carlson in his speech for the kind of a Turning Point USA convention, or indeed a really interesting conversation he had with Ben Shapiro, where he actually does kind of support the kind of the baseline economic desires of the people who voted MAGA and understands their concerns. That he understood that we can't buy a house, you can't buy a car. A lot of Americans are falling away from the American dream, right? He was really, in this clip with Ben Shapiro, he opposed them, for example, wanting to replace truck drivers with self-driving trucks because it would cause societal chaos and they'd lose loads of jobs in the way that loads of jobs have already been lost, right? This is a guy who understands where these kind of narratives and these kind of beliefs are going. And if he wants to maintain a listener base and a viewer base, he has to know where this is going to go. And so given that we are seeing an American president, we're seeing an American administration, one that wants to project itself as being a strongman, essentially being allowed to be pulled around on a leash by Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel, and indeed the Christian Zionists who are the real power brokers behind the scenes, behind the Trump administration, the neocons who are the ones actually diverting policy on this, ones being the progenitors of policy, because it's far above Netanyahu and Trump. That doesn't scream the America First strongman that these MAGA voices represented, or these MAGA voices wanted to elect into office. And Tucker Carlson knows this. He's not an idiot. As you say, he's very happy to play an idiot to try and ensure that people think that he is learning things on the spot when he knows it already. But he knows that that's what his base wants to hear. We saw what happened when this base reacted to the Netanyahu and the Nelk Boys podcast. They were outraged, right? That's the base that he wants to try and win over. He's already guesses himself with the Nelk Boys to try and gain this audience too. And it doesn't bode well for the Christian Zionists in America. It doesn't bode well for the neocons and the American unipolarity enjoyers in America, if not even Tucker Carlson is on side anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the question is why? I mean, there's a few theories. I mean, why is he following these people? Why is he following the sentiment of his audience precisely in order to quote unquote lead them? One is I think he wants to go into politics. And the guy's 56. I think he probably wants to go into politics. He's achieved everything you want to achieve as a conservative journalist in American life. He was at Fox. He's now doing his own thing. He's got a big profile. Where else is there to go? So I would not be surprised if 5-10 years from now, he finds himself in a political arena. Trump's not going to be around forever. Apart from J.D. Vance, there aren't really many people, or the Trump kids, there aren't many people you can look around and think, well, they'll be the ones to pick up the baton. Of course, those people will come to the fore now. But I think for the most part, a lot of figures who will try and take that mantle will be coming out of the media. Charlie Kirk, and I think Tucker Carlson are two of them. There are other theories too, of course. You know, he's really working for the CIA. He's trying to implement and shape policy in accordance with the interests of the deep state, break with the status quo of the post-war era. I mean, maybe there's no evidence for it, but it's certainly a big shift to be talking to people like Tony Aguilar and John Mearsheimer about these things. Before we go, let's just look quickly at a graphic from Trita Parsi, friend of the show. He posted this on X. I mean, this is really, really powerful. Really powerful. Just spent an hour and a half in a small group with Tony Aguilar, the former Green Beret and contractor at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, who has blown the whistle on all of the war crimes that GHF and the Israeli Defense Forces are committing. So this is the chap that was just speaking to Tucker Carlson. Trita saying, I just spent 1.5 hours with him, behind the curtains, private conversations. I am shook to my core. There is so much that will come out. And as Tony said, a day of reckoning will come when the entire world will know what has happened. And the US, but also the UK too, role in it. Nuremberg will follow. Treater is not a hyperbolic guy. He's a very, very calm person. For him to arrive at that conclusion, I would suggest, means it's probably warranted. Helena, thanks for joining me tonight.
I mean, I'll just add one thing on to the end of that, which is that when Zara Sultana tweeted out that David Lammy would end up in The Hague, people scolded her for being unserious, including Rupert Lowe. They said that it was student politics, go back to your student union. When this is very similar, almost identical, in fact, to the same statement that was made by Kit Malthouse, the Conservative MP, in the House of Commons to David Lammy's face, saying, "Oh, you're not worried about ending up at The Hague." And I think that tweet from Treater Parsi is very similar in those same veins. People in the West have been sheltered. They've been sheltered from the consequences of their actions and the consequences of their belligerence and the consequences for their support for these kinds of brutalities. And I do believe a day of reckoning will come. And people like Zara, people like Kit, people like Treater Parsi, they'll be vindicated in the end. History will absolve them.